Hello and welcome to another episode. I'm your host, Sabine Gideon, and I'm excited to bring you another powerhouse to discuss women and power this week. So for those of you who are completely new, welcome to the show. For those of you who are coming back, welcome back. I appreciate your support. If you are completely new to me, again, I am Sabine Gideon, the host of the show. I am also an executive career and leadership strategist, as well as an author and a speaker. So I'm happy to have you here. Well, enough about me. I am excited to get into this conversation with my guest today, Rosie. And so I will share with you a little bit about her background, and then I will have her share with you some of her journey, and then we'll get into this juicy discussion around women and power. So with that, Rosie Zilinskas is a certified high performance coach behind the No Woman Left Behind brand, which includes the No Woman Left Behind podcast, career building services, mentoring support group, and consultancy. She also co-authors the best-selling book, Engaging Speakers, Voices of Truth. She is passionate about supporting women advancing on equal footing within the corporate world. Welcome to the show, Rosie.
Oh, Sabine, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Absolutely, me too. And so, for those of you who haven't checked out No Woman Left Behind yet, please do, because yours truly has been on the show. Rosie brings on really, really powerful, insightful, practical advice. And so, I'm a big fan of the show myself. And I encourage you, if you haven't already checked it out, to go check that out. But before we get into all of that, Rosie, tell us a little bit about your career journey and very specifically some of the key milestones within your career that kind of have led you to the transitions to even start this consultancy and fempire that you are currently building.
Oh, well, thank you so much for all the accolades. I really appreciate it. So I can tell there's a couple of places throughout my career. So I had been in the corporate world for 31 years. My entire career has been in the insurance industry. And I'm the type of person that every 3 to 5 years, I'm always looking for the next opportunity. But when I was 40, I found myself being stuck. I had just finished a divorce. I had these two little kids and I had to take care of them. And so I started questioning myself, like, how am I going to take care of these kids by myself now? I need to make more money. So I was doing all the things. I was volunteering and backing up my manager and all the things. And I was considered a high performer, but nothing was happening in my career. I remember being 40, sitting in my desk thinking, okay, any day now, someone's going to notice my hard work and going to offer me a promotion. And nobody ever came. And so it wasn't until I created what I'm calling a playbill of accomplishments that, then I had the courage to go talk to my manager and their manager. That's when things finally started happening for me. And it was like a light bulb. It's like, oh my gosh, how did I not go and communicate my aspirations to people? So I think that was like the big one. And then 6 months later, I was a regional underwriting manager. So I got into management right away from that action. And about 3 years into my management position, I started campaigning for myself. I started talking to all the people, whether it's my boss, their boss, leaders in all the other departments. I was calling people abroad that worked in the company. And I started letting everybody that I knew know that I was interested in doing something bigger and contributing to the organization. So that was in about 2015. And finally, in 2017, I was promoted to an executive vice president in that same corporation. So that's the other one that I did it so completely different the second time around. And everything was so proactive. So that's the major difference with those two milestones. And since then, I've left the corporate world. I am now the founder and CEO of No Woman Left Behind. And I love empowering women in their corporate careers to overcome their day-to-day obstacles, boost confidence through preparation, and most importantly, create their career roadmap.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And so one of the things that you mentioned, I want to touch on two things, but one of the things that you mentioned was something that we talked about on your show, where, you know, a lot of us, women in particular, we have this mindset of put your head down, right? Like do all the work, take on all the dots. And if you've heard me before, dots are development opportunities that suck. And just do all the things and hope and pray and wish someone notices all of your hard work and effort. But we know that that just results in more hard work. So I'm glad to hear that you've also like transitioned from that space and got bold enough to just ask. The second piece that I love that you shared was around the I started campaigning. And that is such an important piece because there's so many layers to that. But I'm curious, what triggered that? What was the catalyst within that process that said, okay, you know what? I need to be proactive and I need to put a strategy behind these next several moves.
Well, I can tell you exactly what it was. 3 years almost to the date of every promotion that I've ever had, I start getting antsy because I need to know what's next. I have this vision for myself to continue to progress and move forward. And at the 3 year mark, I'm like, okay, what's next? I need to prepare. And the way I can prepare is by starting to talk to people, starting to let them know what my aspirations were. And then from there, making sure that I was at the top of my game. So when the opportunity finally came, I knew that the position for an executive vice president was going to be opening up in October of 2016. Then it took a few months, which was actually to my benefit because it took a few months for them to get all the interviews and all the job openings approved and all that stuff. So I didn't start interviewing for the position until April of 2017. And during that whole time from October to April, I was preparing. Obviously, my resume was done, but I was having my sister interview me, my brother-in-law interview me. I was making sure that I did all my research. And one critical thing that I did is I created what I'm calling a story vault. So I answered about 30 to 40 behavioral interview questions. I physically answered them and I picked the best 5 or 10, and then I converted them into a story that I could talk to in an interview, and that became my story vault. So that whole time I was preparing. So that was the catalyst to answer your question.
Oh, that's awesome. And I'm curious, were you working with a career coach? Like, did you have a mentor or anyone supporting you through this process? Or did you just figure out like, all right, let's put the strategy together and ride this out?
You know, I did have a mentor, but I've always been into personal development. I started the journey of personal development back in like 2007.
Mhm.
So I've been doing it for a really long time. And again, I've always been very proactive, very motivated. And I actually just put all the pieces together now that I have put into what I'm calling your career roadmap.
Oh, that is awesome. So all of your hard-won wins and the experiences and the bruises along the way, you are now taking that and supporting other women. And I think that's so important. And I just shared this on the podcast that I recorded earlier this week, that it's so important that when we do climb to the top, that we let that ladder back down, or that we, you know, leave some breadcrumbs, so to speak, so that other women can follow in that pathway. Because it's not this, you know, beautiful linear path of like, oh yeah, I worked hard and then I moved up. There's a lot of moving pieces to that. And so I'm sure there will be a lot of women who benefit from your lessons learned and your process in this space. And then the other thing that I wanted to comment on is I love the fact that you had a very definitive time frame. So you had that 3 year mark. I remember when I first stepped into corporate America, I had a senior leader, and she said, Sabine, every 2 years, you should be looking at the next role. And at the time, I remember asking her, well, why? She was like, by the 2 year mark, you've mastered the day to day. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't things that you could still learn like within that, but like the day to day of whatever role that you're doing, you've mastered that. And now you need to get to the next space. And I always held that like with me. I don't know that I've spent any. Oh, maybe one role I spent more than 2 years, but like ever since getting that feedback, that was always my threshold. So again, for those of you who are listening, it may not necessarily be that you're looking to climb up the ladder, but thinking through how do you still continue to remain engaged, continue to stay in a space of learning. Our minds will go into autopilot if we stay in a space for too long.
Absolutely. And I just want to add my favorite quote by Madeleine Albright. There's a special place in hell for women don't help other women. Mm-hmm. Because my whole mission, and every time I do a talk or a presentation, I always say, like, if there's one thing that you learn, go back and share it with every woman in your life, because it is so important for us to elevate each other up. So I just wanted to throw that quote in there.
Yeah, I love that. And you are in the right place and speaking to the right audience for that. So, let's transition into this whole conversation around power, right? So I have been on a campaign, if you will, started as a personal campaign. And then similar to what you just said, it turned into, wait a minute, if I'm just learning this, or if this is just coming to me, how many women out there like are stuck, or in not stuck in the sense that you don't know what power is, but stuck in the capacity, if you will, to embody powerful and to be okay with saying I am powerful. I know for so long, especially with like women's movements, the term empowered has been like the thing that's associated with us, right? Like, oh yeah, it's women empowering women. And don't get me wrong, I use that all the time because I do believe that there's a place for that. But I feel like I got to a place where the next level was, I feel super empowered. I'm empowering other women. Now I want them to take control. Now I want them to take action. Now I want them to step into, places of leadership and not fear or, be consumed by imposter syndrome or whatever else of, do I belong here? Or, did I just get promoted here by accident? But really standing in who we are. And so that's what kind of birthed this series. And I really just want to talk through, because so many of us have different experiences, different lived experiences. And based on those lived experiences, we've defined these 3 words, which I'm going to ask you to define: power, authority, and influence in different ways. And there's no right or wrong way, but the real purpose of this is to really, let's examine how we're defining them. And based on those definitions, is it serving us or is it holding us back? And so with that, I'm curious, Rosie, how do you define power, authority, and influence, and how have they shown up for you?
So the way I define power, and this might be a very simple definition, but is to trust myself. And the reason I say that, Sabine, is because I'm 54 years old. And all my life, I had this theme of doing research. So if I had a personal problem, what I would do is, I have 3 sisters. I would call my 3 sisters. I would call my mom. I would call my 3 best friends. I would call my boyfriend at the time, or, whatever. And I would gather all this intel and information. And then I would make the decision about whatever the situation was. And as I got older, and specifically over the last, I'm going to say, decade, I realized that I didn't need to call anybody. I know what I need to do for myself. And then the other problem with that is I was giving my power away by calling all these people, because obviously with 10 people, you're going to have 10 different conflicting, opinions. And over the last decade, I've realized that when I have a problem, I sit with it and I kind of, I pray about things and I let it simmer, and then I eventually know what to do. And to me, that is taking back my power to trust myself to do the next right thing. So that's how I define power. I think for me, I'm going to go to influence first. Influence is what you and I are doing. We are trying to learn ourselves and in turn teach other women so that they can then in their turn empower other women. So I want to influence especially the younger moms that have little daughters, because in my research, I know that girls' confidence peaks at age 9 years old. And so I know that this lack of confidence as we're growing up is how we're socialized. Of course, we all know that. But the other thing is we hold ourselves back by not taking action. It's the fear of the unknown. So when I think of influence, it's educate yourself and then help educate others. Even if you share one big, tip that you have found that has changed your life, I think that's the way you can influence yourself. And then authority to me is about how you present yourself to others. Women are notorious for apologizing 50 times a day for no reason and speaking in questions. So those two things right there, if you just adjust your verbiage from I'm sorry for being late to thank you for being patient, and then making sure that you're speaking in clear, direct statements instead of questions, that right there is going to give you so much more authority than you ever did. So I'm a big proponent of Toastmasters. Toastmasters is I think it's like $59 every 6 months. And in Toastmasters, you really learn to use your voice to be very authoritative with your language. But I think there's so many easy little things that we can do to shift that authority immediately. So that's how I define those words.
Oh, I love it. And I love the examples. And so if we could dig into the authority piece and what you shared about women speaking in questions. That is huge. And the minute you said it, I was just like, oh, oh, that from it, I mean, it speaks to confidence. It speaks to how people are perceiving you. So can you, I don't know if you've done any like research in particular around this, but like, can you speak more to what that looks like and maybe a little bit of why do we speak in questions versus affirmative statements?
Well, the biggest reason is how we are socialized. We don't have those parents, and I wish that we could just incorporate confidence classes throughout our education, because that would be such a huge thing. But we always are trained to be the people pleasers and to not make any waves. And so when I was working in the corporate world, so often women that reported to me would come to me and say, well, I'm going to have a conversation with Mr. Johnson about this policy. Are you asking me or are you telling me? So it's just a very significant inflection of your voice that kind of goes at the end of that sentence, instead of being, I am having a conversation with Mr. Johnson about the policy tomorrow at 3. So they're telling me what they're doing. And it's the way we're using our words, and we're not trained to be aware. And it's all about awareness. We're not trained to be aware on how we carry ourselves. We're soft-spoken. We don't want to make waves. So those are a lot of the reasons why when you go from college to a working environment, and as a matter of fact, there is research done where women in college lectures are 2.5 times less likely to ask a question than males, because in their heads they're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to sound silly. Oh my gosh, the professor is very well educated. I don't know if I understood the question, so or the subject, so I don't want to ask a question. So there's a lot of mental stress and fatigue that we put ourselves through because the men aren't thinking that, they're just asking the question. So that's where I think we need to become more authoritative and ask the question. If you have a question, ask the question. There are no dumb questions, so that's a little bit about what I have to say about that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for breaking that down. A couple of thoughts that came to me as you were saying that inflection in your voice, like that is a huge piece that I will now be paying attention to in terms of how I'm speaking, when I'm asking or when I'm sharing something. But also, I think that there's this piece around, you know, this feeling that we always have to ask for permission. Like, even if it is something that it is that we want to do or that we plan to do, there's always a hint in the tone of, I want to do this, but I'm asking for permission, right? And don't get me wrong, there are times where we just need the confirmation, we need the reassurance, right? But recognizing when, you have a bright idea or you want to move forward with something and you go to someone, like, are you seeking that person's approval or that person's permission? And how is that being communicated? So given everything that's going on, and I feel like every other month there's something new, there's some new challenge that we're gifted. I'll say that we're gifted in terms of, humanity really tapping into the essence of its humanity. For young women who are coming up right now, like I think about myself. I have a niece, she's 16, but I think about myself and just like that period of time. There was no social media. There was, the only people that you saw in high level roles were wherever you were, right? And I think now these younger women can see more women at the top than you and I saw. But at the same time, there's still fewer numbers. So given what you've experienced, given the work that you're doing, and really this need, or it's a blatant awareness that we need to teach more women at the younger stage how to build that internal confidence, how to tap into that internal power, how to own their voice from a space of confidence and authority, and then also how to leverage that to influence others. What are some of your thoughts in terms of, and there's no right or wrong here, but in terms of what we can do or what we can organize, whatever that looks like, to help support more young women, young women, as they're coming up into either corporate or into their own businesses?
I'm going to say the biggest thing and I'm going to say boost confidence, is preparation. And the reason I say that, Sabine, is because I can use myself as the example. Remember, I told you that from October, to April, I was preparing. Well, for the interviews in October, I wasn't so sure that I was going to get the position. In April, I was sure. And the reason is because of the preparation. So when I hear somebody, I need to work on my confidence, the way you work on your confidence is by preparing. So, for example, I help women create their career roadmap. And there are definitely different components of the career roadmap. But when you start, everything is kind of fuzzy and you know that you have to create something. But at the end, you have your resume done, you have your story vault done, you have your personal mission statement done. You are uncovering blind spots by talking to people and say, hey, what do I do well and what can I do better? And they help you uncover your blind spots. There can be a couple of assessment skills, things like that. So all of those components are going to uncover a little piece of knowledge about your own self that you're going to learn and you're going to own. And as you are progressing through that process, because it is a process, by the end, you will be able to go into your manager's office or your teacher's office or whatever, and you'll be able to articulate your worth with massive confidence, conviction, and clarity. But you will be so much more confident doing that because you have done all the preparation along the way. So I'm a big proponent of preparing yourself, preparing your script. So I call it crafting your script, because you need to go into your high school teacher's office or your college professor's office and say, these are the things that I need to accomplish. How can I do that? But writing out what you want to say with very precise and key words that give you that power, all of that put together gives you the confidence that you need to, again, be able to show your worth in any type of situation that you are in. So does that answer your question?
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing you say, well, it's two parts to this, right? It's the tactical part of actually like doing the work, but also simultaneously, you are training your brain, you are training your subconscious. It's building evidence in that space as you're moving forward into that piece. Because we know mindset is 85% or 80%, depending on who you're listening to, but 85% of success towards whatever you're moving towards is your mindset. And so if you don't, part of what you're saying is in doing that and taking this action, you are actually helping to support your mind wherever your inner critic might be saying that you're not worthy or you don't deserve this or anything like that. As you're moving forward and taking action, you are building that evidence. And as you're, building this story book, if you will, around all the successes, all of the accomplishments, that's also reinforcing the evidence that you are worthy of this role, you are ready for the role. And when you get, by the time you sit in front of the interviewer, at that point, it's just like, it's a done deal.
Yes,
it's a done deal.
Exactly. And I love that you said that because, again, people are like, oh, well, I don't know. Well, you don't know because you haven't sat down and created your career roadmap. I can guarantee any woman that sits down and puts in the work for this process will come out so confident and be able to talk to anybody about their goals and be able to share their professional proposition, like value proposition, but it's building blocks and it takes time. It's not going to be a once and done, but it can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so going back real quick, as it relates to power, because you did define power as an internal knowing and an internal trusting of yourself that you have the answer. Obviously being an entrepreneur and even when you're in corporate, right, there's a lot of evidence out there that would try to convince us that we don't have power. And so I'm curious, what have you put in place specifically for yourself to help you maintain your own personal power? Are there, is there a practice, ritual, or things that you do on a regular basis so that you personally can remain grounded in that?
The biggest thing that I always remind myself of is that, and I think there's a couple of quotes out there, it's none of my business what anybody else thinks about me. Because when I start thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, what are they going to say? My mother is notorious for, oh my God, what are the neighbors going to say? I'm like, well, who cares? So I have made it a point to focus on the things that I can control and ignore the things that I can't control. Because when you start focusing on what everybody else thinks, I would never put out a TikTok video if I'm worried about the judgment, because people are going to judge you. But you know what? I have to take my power. I have to do work on my mission, which is to empower women in the corporate world. And with every video, with every podcast that we record, we are showing that we are sharing our influence, our authority, and taking back our power.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you do anything like as far as like a morning routine or like a daily routine to like help you ground on a day to day? Because I know this entrepreneurial grind can have you on a high one day and then in the corner the next day. So I'm just curious.
Yes. So I don't know if you have heard of Brendan Burchard.
Mhm.
He is a huge motivational speaker. I have his app, and his whole enterprise is called Growth Day. And by the way, I'm a Brendan Burchard certified high performance coach, but I listen to him every morning. He has what is called a morning fire, and he talks about different topics and subjects. Sometimes it's like 8 minutes, sometimes it's 30 minutes, but it's the lesson of the day, how to prime your brain. I am trying to meditate on a regular basis, although it's not, perfect, but movement in the morning, growth day, and then following my, the rest of my routine. So that, and one thing that I am trying to change right now is, instead of, which I'm guilty of, watching my phone, looking at my phone at the end of the day, I'm shifting to trying to read instead of watching, Netflix or, Hulu or whatever on my phone. So
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for that. So we're going to shift into the blitz session here. So it's 3 questions, 2 minutes. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, awesome. First question. Knowing what you know now, given the experience that you've had, both personal and professional, if you could go back to a younger version of yourself and give her some key piece of advice, what might that be?
Always keep learning and trust what you already know. Because again, that goes back to me not trusting myself. And I wish I had started trusting myself a lot younger in life.
Yeah, I love that. And then let's look ahead, right? So, you are on this mission, you are obviously working towards it, and supporting women now, 50, 60, however many years from now, right? You're looking back on your life and, you are crafting your story. What might that narrative be?
Well, I can tell you that my vision is to eradicate the gender gap in the business world, not just the corporate world, worldwide. So that would be something that I will continue to work on from now till the day that I die. So that's my vision for my life.
Oh, I love that. What a powerful legacy. Powerful legacy. And then lastly, you mentioned reading. So I'm curious, is there a book or maybe a couple of books that you've read that you have found to be, pivotal in your growth and in your development, either personally or professionally?
So I'm actually going to point to a new book that's been out for less than 2 years, I think, but the Lessons in Chemistry is a fantastic book. And I see, so Bonnie Garmus, she's my hero, because I think she's over 60 years old. She published the book in April of 2022. And the book is about a chemist, a female chemist that is coming up in the 50s and 60s. And she is not taken seriously, but she's very nonsensical. She doesn't really care what other people say. She is a chemist and she's going to do her thing. And inevitably, throughout the story, she ends up with a TV show where she is influencing women in a positive way. And it is and by the way, this is an Apple TV series. There's 8 episodes and it is amazing. And by the way, Brie Larson, who is in the Marvel movies, plays Elizabeth Zott, and she does a phenomenal job. So I just love this story and I love that book. So that would be my book that I want people to read.
Okay, can you do me a favor? Just repeat the title again.
Lessons in Chemistry.
Lessons in Chemistry. Okay, we will be sure to include that in the show links below. So thank you for that, Rosie. Yep. So for those who are listening who would love to connect with you, what's the best way to connect with you, and what do you have going on besides your amazing podcast?
Yeah, I would say they can go straight to my website, which is womenleftbehind.com, and they can take a promotion readiness checklist. They can complete the promotion readiness checklist. It's right on the front page of my website, and it will give the person the user, an indication of where they are in their promotion readiness. So how ready are you when that next opportunity falls in your lap? You'll get a score, and if they want to, they can book a strategy call with me, complimentary, and we can talk about their career. So that's how they can get a hold of me.
All right, awesome. So we will include the link to the website. I know you're very active on LinkedIn as well, so we'll include your LinkedIn, and of course, obviously, I'm pretty sure your podcast is on all of the platforms. So
Yes.
again, it's No Woman Left Behind. I wish I looked up the episode that I was on. I would give it to you, but I will link it in the show notes. So you can look down in the show notes and see the episode where Rosie and I chatted. With that, Rosie, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your wisdom, and really just your passion for supporting more women. And for those of you who are listening, you know, if you are in corporate America and you are at either phase that we have been in, and really looking to own your confidence and create your own roadmap, I would definitely highly recommend that you reach out to Rosie. So with that, we will be back next week with another female powerhouse. Till then, take care.
Thank you, Sabine.